Today on this Peugeot 206 2006 we're going to be replacing the radiator. Replacing the radiator isn't a particularly difficult job, especially on this model. But before I do that, to make life a little bit easier, I'll be removing this little airbox here and probably this air filter housing, just to make life a little bit easier. I don't think you need to remove that necessarily, but in this instance I will. So right, let's get into it. On this particular model, removing the radiator is relatively easy. On other models, to get access to these screws to release the top clamps, it's covered by a bumper and a shield. So as I say, on this particular model, because that isn't in place, then it makes access to these screws easy. So we have to remove three hoses from the radiator first. There's this top one which leads to the top of the reservoir, then there's the top hose that leads to the thermostat, and then there's the bottom hose. They're all secured by these clips which are quite easy to release. On this particular car we don't have to jack it up to release all the coolant out of the radiator, it's just releasing that bottom hose. Right, we'll just loosen this clamp and move it back to there so we can get the hose off. And we'll do the same at the bottom. And just release this top hose. Not forgetting to take the top off the reservoir. This particular clip here just loosens and should just pull out. There we go. The next step, so that we can remove the radiator, is to undo these two Torx nuts, and then these clamps will just pull out of the way. And then we can just pull the radiator up and out of its slower locating points. Now let's see what Torx fitting this is. Nope. That's the one, which is a T30. Then they just pull out. As you can see, there's a rubber. Put that down. As you can see, there's a rubber insert which locates on there. Stop it rattling and shaking. So that's one and two. Now the radiator should just lift straight out. But don't forget that in front of the radiator is the cooling system for the air conditioning, so be careful just to pull it straight up and out. That's released it, and just pull it straight up, and there we have it, the old radiator. Now I reckon you could remove this radiator in about 5 minutes, but faffing and filming, it's taken a little bit longer than that. Anyway, that's the old radiator. The reason for removing it is that at the bottom here, it's been leaking a little bit. So rather than add rad weld, we'll just replace it. Here you have the two radiators. That's the original that was on the car when it was first purchased, and here's the new aftermarket one. Now they range in prices quite dramatically. This is a relatively cheap one, around about £30, but if it does the job, that's fine. There are some blanked off outlets, so this is sort of a multi-purpose one for Peugeot, Citroën, depending obviously on the model. Some have different outlets on them. So we'll unwrap it and get it fitted, and just clean up a little bit around the engine bay first before we go ahead and do that. So that's next. Always remember that you need to safely dispose of the coolant that you take out of the car, because antifreeze is not a good thing to just chuck down the drain or to chuck anywhere, as the water will evaporate and leave the antifreeze there. Also, it's not very good for pets, and they are drawn to the sweet smell. So dispose of it safely. Okay, we've had a clean up at the back there to remove any dust, leaves or debris, and we'll just slot this in carefully. Now you can put some cardboard between the front of this radiator and the matrix for the air conditioning system, but in this case there's a reasonable amount of room there, so it's now just locating the pegs, and that seems fine, and just reattaching the clamps. That's the radiator now fixed in position. Now it's just a matter of reattaching the bottom hose, but we'll leave these open, these two, so that we can refill the system and use this as a bleed to get all the air out of the system. We'll probably have to bleed it in other areas as well, but we'll get to that shortly. Now there is a bleed screw here on the thermostat housing, which we'll mess about with in a minute. But I'm just going to top up the system with coolant. Okay, I've mixed the coolant, and as I said right at the beginning, we should leave these off, and I've forgotten to reattach them, so I've loosened them off again, and we're going to add, so I've already added some coolant, but I'm going to add a bit more until it starts coming out of these top hoses, so we know that the radiator is filled. Right, it's started to come out of that top hose now, so we can refit that. Reattach the hose clip. And then we'll just add a bit more until it starts coming out here. And there we go. So I'll just fit that back on. Right, there are two more bleed screws, I believe. The first one is here on the thermostat housing, so if we just undo that, just to make sure there's no air in that particular part of the system. As you can see, that's bled. Right, I've just checked the two bleed screws again and everything's fine, so I'll go ahead and refit the filter box for the last time. Okay, now we'll run it up to temperature and just make sure everything's fine. As you can see, the temperature gauge is reading about, well, it was just up to 100, but the fans kicked in and it's coming down nicely now. So yeah, I'd say that's job well done. The previous radiator must have been blocked because the temperature was going up into the red when you were in a standstill at traffic. So as you can see, it's dropping nicely now. So all I can say is that's job well done. If you like this particular video, please subscribe. There'll be lots more to come, and there'll be lots more on other cars as well. Okay, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and please like. Bye.